이란이라는 나라가 존재하는 오직 한 가지 이유는 지구상에서 이스라엘을 없애버리는 것이다. 이슬람은 평화의 종교가 아닙니다. 이슬람은 거짓이고 학살의 영입니다. 이래도 이스라엘이 아직도 전쟁 범죄 국가입니까?
Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, the mastermind of the October 7th massacres eliminated. What's next for the hostages and Israel's multi-front war? Analysis of how Sinwar's death affects Israel's standing in the Middle East and U.S.-Israel relations. Plus, the connection between anti-Semitism and Islam. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of October 7th and the mass murderer of more Jews than anyone since Hitler, is dead. On Wednesday, Israeli soldiers killed Sinwar in the southern Gazan city of Rafah. He had evaded the IDF for more than a year.
Soon after the news, celebrations broke out at the Western Wall, at IDF posts in Gaza, and around the country. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said it's not the end of the war in Gaza, but the beginning of the end. He spoke directly to the people of Gaza.
I have a simple message. This war can end tomorrow. It can end if Hamas lays down its arms and returns our hostages. And Israel will guarantee the safety of all those who return our hostages. But to those who would harm our hostages, I have another message. Israel will hunt you down and bring you to justice.
Sinwar planned the October 7th massacre, where terrorists killed nearly 1,200 Israelis and kidnapped more than 250, including Americans.
On this day, our thoughts are with the families of those murdered or kidnapped because of Sinwar.
IDF spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said the young soldiers who killed the terror leader didn't even realize it was Sinwar they were chasing. An IDF drone flew into the house where Sinwar was hiding and captured his final moments. Although the IDF fulfilled its pledge to bring Sinwar to justice, Hagari said the work is not done.
We will not rest until we bring home all our hostages by any means. And we will continue to operate until we complete all our missions in defense of the people of Israel.
But some fear Hamas may kill all of the hostages now.
They might murder them or do something because of the murder of Sinwar. And that's the thing that I'm afraid of.
President Biden said he's already talking about the future with Netanyahu.
You start to destroy the land.
The U.S. State Department saw Sinwar as the major blockade to ending the war in Gaza.
He didn't just launch this conflict, but for the past year has refused the efforts of the United States and our partners to end it.
While some Gazans are sad about Sinwar's death, others see it as a chance to end the war that so devastated their lives.
There is no reason left for them to continue the war any longer. When we heard the news of Sinwar, it is true that we were sad for him, but at the same time, we were happy that the war could end.
Netanyahu says this is indeed the time to end the war, not just with the Iranian proxy Hamas, but with Iran's entire axis of evil.
All those who seek a future of prosperity and peace in the Middle East should unite to build a better future. Together, we can push back the forces of darkness and create a future of light and hope for all of us.
Joining me to talk more about Sinwar's death and its after effects is CBN Middle East analyst John Wagi. John, great to be with you. Tell me your initial reaction to Sinwar's death.
Well, you know, Chris, it was on the holiday of Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles. That's supposed to be a celebration holiday. And a week and a half ago, you would have thought there's really not much to celebrate. And this just turned it around instantly. I mean, I walked past young yeshiva students on the streets singing and shouting. And I know you probably have your own examples of the kind of celebrations that went on. And it wasn't the celebration about the death per se. It was the celebration of the person who orchestrated this horrible attack being out of the way. And it was a victory, a notable victory for Israeli Defense Forces.
And if you look back in the last several weeks, just an amazing series of events. Go back way, and it seems like ancient history, Ismail Haniyeh, and then you have just a few weeks ago Hassan Nasrallah, and almost all of Hezbollah's leadership eliminated, and now Sinwar himself. Hard to believe all the things that are unfolding.
It really is, and as the story pointed out, it has to send a message to the remaining terrorists, Hamas leaders, or would-be leaders in Gaza that, you know, you might want to think couple times about Gallant's message that you know, it's a time to raise your hands and surrender rather than have you and other family members and whoever else die in the same fashion that the other terrorist masterminds have done. So you know, we'll have to see if anybody takes them up on it.
Yeah, celebrations here in Israel and many places around the world, but also I know the Palestinian Authority had a moment of silence to Sinwar, and how have other organizations reacted?
Well, the other thing that's notable to me, saw it on social media, is UNRWA, the UN Relief and Works Agency for the Palestinian refugees, and they put a black slash over the corner of their logo on social media, basically saying we're in mourning for the death of Sinwar, who most of the world knows is a notorious murderer. And that doesn't bode well for the future, I believe, of the UN or that agency. I mean, you've already got the Knesset working on legislation that would pretty much hamstring UNRWA's activities in the areas that Israel has some control over. They've already taken an UNRWA building here in Jerusalem and are rezoning it for apartments. They're sending a pretty strong message, and I think that this kind of victory, the elimination of Sinwar, emboldens Israel to go ahead and take on some of these diplomatic wars that they've had to fight alongside the shooting wars in Lebanon with the Houthis and in Gaza. So.
And I know Guterres right now is persona non grata, the head of the UN here in Israel, because of his stance. Looking ahead, though, in just a few days, we're going to have an election in the United States.
Right.
What changes do you think, either way, that's going to impact here in Israel and its wars on so many fronts?
Yeah, it's funny, Chris, because you think of the same people who 6 months ago were calling for Netanyahu to be ousted from power are now basically looking at these eliminations and assassinations, and even Kamala Harris, the Democratic nominee, is saying, well, this is a good thing that this happened, and the State Department and others are saying this is a good thing. But most of the time, 6 months ago, most people were saying Netanyahu's the central problem in the Middle East. That has flipped, and what could be coming in Washington, we don't know yet, but if there is another administration that doesn't involve the kind of people who think that a ceasefire is the most necessary thing in the Gaza Strip, the ones who are calling for Israel to pull out of the Philadelphia corridor just weeks ago.
That's right.
Now it was the very edge of the Philadelphia corridor where Sinwar was eliminated. So we could be seeing a different construct to all the world's diplomacy, the diplomatic fronts. The UN might not be getting the kind of support that they've been getting from the Biden administration. We don't know that.
Yeah.
It looks like a close election, a very close election, and we don't know how much legal maneuvering and other kind of maneuvering there's going to be even after the votes are cast. But there is it portends that we could see some big shifts in addition to the big shifts that we've already seen just in the last few weeks.
And one of the seldom
breakneck speed.
Yeah, one of the seldom told stories, I think, John, of this whole year, a year plus now, is the fact of the importance of prayer. People praying for the peace of Jerusalem, for wisdom for the leaders of Israel.
Absolutely, and it's going on worldwide. You've seen it, I've seen it, we've seen it here in the streets of Jerusalem, a lot more effort towards prayer. And I think people are looking upward, and it's can't be anything but good.
Amen. Thank you, John.
Thanks.
Up next, an urgent call from Iranian Crown Prince Pahlavi to Israel's neighbors and to his own countrymen.
Amid growing tensions between Israel and Iran, more Iranians are openly calling for the Jewish state to take military action against their own government. Citizens frustrated with the brutal regime believe such an attack could help end leadership that has long suppressed their freedom. George Thomas has more.
Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi is urging Iran's Middle East neighbors to stand against Tehran's influence, help support Israel's war efforts, and bring down the dictatorship.
The regime in Tehran is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of innocents, Iranians, Arabs, and Israelis, Christians, Muslims, and Jews.
Pahlavi, the son of Iran's last Shah, went on social media saying most Iranians want to see their own oppressive government removed.
So I say to you, our friends across the Middle East, our region deserves so much better. But in order to succeed, first, this regime that has held us hostage for nearly half a century must go.
While some Iranians have supported military action against Israel,
if Israel reacts to Iran's action, Iran will respond again and completely crush Israel.
Pahlavi claims the majority of his countrymen would welcome targeted action against the regime. He tells Iranians the real enemy is their own government, led by Ali Khamenei.
The tyrant in Tehran couches his warmongering in Iranian nationalism, but he does not speak for our nation. The crimes his regime has committed against you, our neighbors, are an affront to Iranians and our values.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recently expressed hope for peace between his country and Iran, suggesting that a future free Iran could lead to a new relationship between the two nations.
When Iran is finally free, and that moment will come a lot sooner than people think, everything will be different. Our two ancient peoples, the Jewish people and the Persian people, will finally be at peace. Our two countries, Israel and Iran, will be at peace.
Lana Silk runs Transform Iran, a ministry that operates inside the country, sharing the message of the gospel. She says recent uprisings against the regime demonstrate that Iranians want political change like never before, even to the point of dying for it.
It's a tough fight. They're willing to fight it. They're willing to pay whatever it takes to take down their government. We've seen Iranian people take to social media and invite Israel to attack them on their own soil.
Videos from Iran showed people singing and dancing following Hassan Nasrallah's assassination. Silk adds that most Iranians do not share the government's animosity toward Israel. Since taking power 45 years ago, the regime's clerics have labeled the United States as the Great Satan and Israel as the Little Satan.
I was brought up in the country and I was conditioned to hate Israel and America. As a schoolgirl, we had to wake up every morning and chant death to America, death to Israel. All our teaching, our education, all the propaganda and the news on the walls, Everything was set up to have us hate these two countries. And yet we don't. No matter how hard the government tries, they cannot turn their people against these countries.
During an interview with CBN News, Pahlavi said despite Iran's ongoing violations of religious freedom, people are turning to faith, especially Christianity, like never before.
The discrimination started against religious minorities. The Jews were the first, followed by the Baha'is. Lately, it's been mostly the Christians that are targeted. Iran has probably right now the fastest growing faith in Christianity than any other faith that the country has had. We have hundreds of underground churches.
Silk says the potential for war is driving a sense of urgency among underground Christians in Iran to share their faith.
We're talking about war. We're talking about really unimaginable suffering coming to Iran shortly. So there is a sense of we better be quick to make sure all the people that we love know who Jesus is and what he's done for them before it's too late for them.
George Thomas, CBN News.
Still ahead, Cindy Jacobs from Generals International on the connection between anti-Semitism and Islam.
As Israel continues to fight for its existence with hostile neighbors, you can make a case that it's not a new conflict, or rather it's an ancient conflict surfacing in the 21st century. Prophet Cindy Jacobs from Generals International stopped by our studio and spoke with Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl about this. Take a look.
Cindy Jacobs, welcome to Jerusalem Dateline. Why do you think there's such rampant anti-Semitism in the world today, and where's it coming from?
Well, that is such an excellent question, maybe one of the most pertinent questions we need to ask today in light of Israel, but what's happening around the world with the Palestinian protest and so forth. Well, let's go back and look in history a little bit. There was a Grand Mufti of Jerusalem that was fascinated with Hitler and the Nazis. In 1941, the Grand Mufti went and met with Hitler. And what happened was the Arabic movement merged, these two ancient spirits merged together. So the anti-Semitic spirit from Germany went into the Arabs. You watch this. And then the Mufti went back to Egypt and had a young student named Yasser Arafat.
Yikes.
Yasser Arafat formed the PLO. The Muslim Brotherhood was formed.
Wow.
And this ideology began to go to the whole world.
Wow.
And was celebrated.
All of Israel's soon-to-be neighbors.
Oh, yep,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
All of Gaza, you know, Gaza is spoken in the scripture. We know from Gaza that there were raids to the border cities, consider Ziklag, you know, and David. You know, this were that spirit of the Philistines, that ancient spirit that married with that anti-Semitic spirit that Hitler had.
Yeah.
And it's a potent cocktail.
So how can it be dealt with?
Well, it's very interesting you say that, because I have been praying for Israel, that Israel not stop short. And, you know, I repented as Americans that we have over and over tried to handcuff Israel from being able to finish the task that needed to be finished. And so, what if in 2006, Israel had wiped out Hezbollah? What has happened from 2006 till now? What has happened to the Lebanese people? The only Christian nation, democracy in the Middle East. Hezbollah wanted it. Why? That's that spirit.
Right.
It takes over. Well, very interesting. We know if we read back in the Bible, there was a man named Samson who was a champion. And a champion that was destroying the Philistines. Well, he was captured and he was blinded. And it is said of October 7th, somehow they didn't see the attack coming.
Right.
We don't know. We don't know. An intelligence failure, I believe it was a huge demonic force, actually. So they put out the eyes of Samson, which they often did in those days. Even now in the Middle East, they're putting the eyes out of women who want to not wear the hijab, you know. And so anyway, but what happened? Samson went, in God's purposes, right into the temple of Dagon. The people who were rejoicing. Listen, the Bible talks about judgment that will happen when people rejoice over the destruction of Israel and God's people. And so they were rejoicing in the temple of Dagon, and God gave that anointing to Samson to pull down the pillars. What happened recently here? Israel took out Nazareth. Israel took out the strong man in Lebanon, right, and Hezbollah, and literally pulled down the infrastructure. It was the Samson spirit. Wow. And the same God that anointed Samson in those days to destroy the temple of Dagon can destroy the enemies of Israel today.
Wow. That's very powerful. Cindy Jacobs, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing these powerful words and thoughts with us. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Still ahead, a family in limbo. A message from a man whose family members are still being held hostage.
With the mastermind of October 7th eliminated, all eyes are on Gaza, with renewed focus on the release of the hostages. We spoke with one man from Kibbutz Be'eri, who has family members in captivity. He makes a valuable point that their release shouldn't be a political issue.
What happened there is unimaginable. But what happened there is not an attack of opportunity. What happened there is an invasion. They knew exactly what they were doing. They came here with the intention of murdering people, kidnapping people, and they didn't care if it's men, women, old people, children. I mean, over here you see the picture of a 3-year-old girl who was held hostage in Gaza for 50 days, of an 8-year-old boy that we didn't even know if he was alive or if he was being tortured. Right now, there is a baby being held in Gaza that has spent more time in Gaza than outside of it. The world has started talking about the hostages as if it's part of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, as if it's a political issue. And what I say that it's crazy. Creating this narrative as if the hostages are a part of something bigger, of the political issue, if the hostages are the same thing as humanitarian aid. But this narrative needs to change. Because if we don't change the narrative, if the entire world doesn't go around shouting, it is unacceptable to take people, children, from their beds and hold them in unimaginable conditions without even giving us signs of life, letting us know if they have medication, food, water, anything. It's just unacceptable. If we don't stop it now, if we don't shout to the entire world that this is unacceptable, we'll just tell them this is something legitimate. And then we'll start having kidnapping around the entire world. We have kidnappings in Africa, we have kidnappings in Israel, we'll have kidnappings in the United States and Europe and all around the world. Because we are given legitimacy to holding people against their will. We are given legitimacy to holding babies. Because we're talking about this as if it's some kind of political issues. And this is why I'm here. Because we need all of you to help us share our stories. We need all of you because my voice is small. Their voice is non-existent. None of us can hear them, so we have to speak for them. And we need all our voices to work together and share this story.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and you can access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. Don't forget to sign up for our email blast so you can keep up with breaking news. And please remember to pray for Israel, for the return of the hostages, and for the safety of IDF soldiers and all those in harm's way. And we'll leave you with verse 50 from Psalm 18. He gives his king great victories. He shows unfailing love to his anointed, to David and to his descendants forever. Well, I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.